Welcome back to Media 7. We're talking China, the Olympics and the media with Nick Wang, Jian Yang and Selwyn Manning. We'll step a little sideways now as Simon Pound looks at a New Zealand-based media company that has been making inroads in China for a decade.
The Natural History Unit made its name with wildlife films like this, part of the iconic Wild South series. These days, though, the unit is less likely to be filming bird cranes and more likely to be filming these cranes. NHNZ today makes shows like these for National Geographic, Discovery Channel, and it partners with China's CCTV. Their audiences are in the hundreds of millions. And where do they do this from? Dunedin.
We did a series on New Zealand for CCTV in China, and that had an audience of 300 million people.
Their nature films were often about the ways species had adapted to survive, and that is what the NHNZ has done too. Director Max Quinn used to use this helmet camera to film underwater.
All of these little devices are typical of the sorts of things that we make here for specific jobs.
With a bit of adaptation, it now gives a bird's eye view hundreds of metres above the water, up the Shanghai Super Tower.
So we're 400 metres up. This is my first day at work.
It isn't just shot pacing and audience size changing. The whole process is on its head.
All of those fantastic old shots that cameramen got sitting in hides waiting for a bird to lay an egg, they might have sat there for 3 weeks. Today, companies want us to make a film and turn it over in sort of 10 weeks flat.
But change is the name of the game. And with NHNZ's clever positioning with an emerging powerhouse China, with their millions of viewers, well, the sky's the limit.
You do the multiples of that, and it's colossal. They're outside our ability to comprehend. They're so large.
That report by Simon Pound. Jan, Simon made the point there that this is an absolutely huge media audience if you can reach them. There's certainly some promise for New Zealand companies like the Natural History there, isn't there?
Yes. Now, there are a few points here. First of all, related to media freedom. Now, China now has thousands of magazines, newspapers, and hundreds of channels. While in the past, 30 years ago, just hundreds of magazines, newspapers, always published by the official government. So it's part of development. And secondly, the Chinese government has succeeded in lifting about 300 million people out of poverty through 30 years of development. While Nick mentioned the Chinese Communist Party killed millions of people, that was in the first 30 years, from 1949 to 1979, when China opened up. That through mismanagement of the government. Now, after 1978, when China opened up, things completely changed. So we say this is progress. China has a huge market. Middle class grows about 1% a year. 1%, well, in China, 1% is a huge number, right? So you have 1.4 billion people. And so you can see the consumption or the consumer capabilities could increase dramatically, including the opening up of China, which means the Chinese are now have more access to the outside world. People are more interested in the outside world. Media, Western media, can play a very important role. So it is really a huge market for Western media, indeed.
I thought that was interesting, that figure that we quoted right at the top of the show, that the 12 Olympic sponsors have budgeted $6 billion to reach the Chinese market. So it seems like these games are about as much about corporate capitalism having its way into China as China indeed emerging on the world stage.
No, capitalism is flourishing in China. Indeed, capitalism is, I would say, is doing better than in New Zealand. In terms of socialism, I would say New Zealand is more socialist than China now, because the Chinese government really has not done well in supporting social welfare system. They used to have a very good one before 1978, but then they adopted capitalism. They smashed social welfare system. Now they are trying to rebuild it.
We're almost out of time. I just want a final word from both of you. Nick, what's the one thing you want to see happen in China?
Yeah, I want to
I need you to be brief here. One thing.
One thing, just a very good fairness justice system for Chinese people. Firstly, we need freedom of speech. That's basic human rights for everyone in the world. And also, I don't want to see Olympics as like a war. Okay, all the missiles at Olympic Games stadium. That's wrong.
So, how do you reckon the Western media is doing covering this? A new media, the citizen media, doing any better than the big guys?
I think it's early stages at the moment. I mean, if there's anything to be made from this, and perhaps we'll go back to one of Deng Xiaoping's comments that, you know, you open the windows and the flies come in. If the Western media are the flies, well, it'll be interesting to see what they bring back. I think also that, you know, there's an opportunity here too for China to actually recognise some of the standards that we as Western media are comparing China against. Amnesty International, for example, its website is not able to be viewed from inside China. There are many others that are critical of China that are not able to be viewed from within. It would be quite an inspiration if an Olympics of this standing actually opened up that gate.
And I think we'll conclude on that line of the Western media as flies that go in the window and come back with a message. And that's all we have time for. Thanks to our panellists, Nick Wang, Dr. Jan Yang and Selwyn Manning, and thank you for watching. We'll be back with Media 7 at the same time next week.